All right, today we're going to be making some simple improvements to a photo that looked original like this. Nice little travel photo, family, everybody's smiling. It's rare enough to get that, so I'm going to just option click and say we're going to try to take it from here, dull and a little gray, to a little bit more vibrant photo. So let's go ahead and pop over to our photo and start that process. So we've got our original background layer. Whenever we open it up, Command J is going to pop that up to a new layer, and I'm going to hide that background to keep it safe. And then as we look over here, you can see that really we've just added a few specific things. The vibrance layer, specifically limb, and then some curves, or the vibrance layer that's just going to be affecting the background, and then we're going to bring up the levels for them. So first, as usual, I'm going to select my subject. And let's see how good it does at actually picking the subject. It did a pretty good job, actually. I'm going to switch to my Quick Object Selection tool, which is my W key. Make sure that you've got the Quick Object Selection tool selected. And we come in here, use my brackets to push up the selection a little bit more. It's on the plus setting, so it's going to add to my selection. So I can now click and drag across this and see if we can get, oh, so close. But it actually grabbed little too much, so I'm just going to come back in here and try to grab just a little bit more of that arm. Looking a little too, I'm going to undo, make my brush just a little bit smaller, and actually I could always just switch over to my lasso tool, hold my shift key down so I can add, and I can just select around and add that piece of arm. So that's looking pretty good. Did an okay job on the hair. I'm just going to swoop around here and see if it's caught everything. Looks pretty good. And looks like it's missing a little bit of his pant leg here, so I'm going to hold my shift key down. So I'm adding to the selection. I'm going to go ahead and add that little bit of leg. We could add this little bit of purse, maybe not as critical, but I'm just going to go ahead and select it anyway. And then it looks like it's got her backpack pretty well. Maybe just use my selection tool and grab a few of these pieces that aren't quite getting picked up by the object selection or the quick selection. And let me make sure I grab her hair right here. So now that we've got a little bit of our content selected properly, just going through and grabbing out little pieces of that. Command 0 is going to zoom me back out to this layer. And so first I want to go ahead and adjust the brightness or the vibrance and saturation of the background. So I'm going to go to my new adjustment layers, create a vibrance layer. That vibrance layer, because I had them selected, creates it with a mask already in place. So with vibrance selected, I can actually grab this vibrance slider and push it up, and you'll see that it should, except it's increasing the vibrance and saturation of them. So if I grab this one, I pull it up, you notice it's increasing the vibrance and saturation of them. Because this mask that got created is actually got black around everything except for them. So this black means that it's the white areas are the only things being affected by this layer. So anything in white. So all we need to do is invert that mask. Command I is going to invert that mask. So now when I increase the vibrance layer, it affects only the areas in white. So if I select vibrance now, I can come up here and I could push up the vibrance, which should increase the color pop of everything else. I can also push up the saturation. Since the family is masked out, they're no longer going to be affected by any changes here. And I'm just going to push this vibrance and saturation up. Let's turn it off and on. And we can see a gray dismal background, and we turn it on. The family is still in the same, it remains unchanged, but the background becomes much more saturated, much more vibrant. Very nice. Now, let's go ahead and improve maybe the darker spots of this family just a little bit more. So let's add another one, and we're going to use our curves adjustments. So with curves brought up, you'll notice right now, if I push up any of these pixels, it's going to make, if I click towards this side and I push it up, it brings up the darker sides of the image. But of course, that's affecting everything below, and that's not what I want. So looking back over here at my reference, if I were to grab this, and I just wanted to bring up the darkness just a little bit, so I bring up these darker shadows. But then if the highlights are getting a little too bright, I can actually come up here to the brighter end of my curves, and I can adjust that and bring that back down a little bit. So a very simple little adjustment. We've gone from a dark and dismal sort of gray image to switching it back and having a bright, vibrant image with the family there in place. Now, if I wanted to improve the saturation of them a little bit, of course, I could command click on this vibrance layer, and you see that has selected everything there. Now what it has done, you'll notice the marching ants actually go around the whole outside of the image. So it has actually selected everything except them. So in this case, I can also invert the selection. If I want to go back to just selecting them instead of everything but them, Command I will invert that selection. So now you can see Command I has now inverted that, and so that the curves are only affecting the family. So we can see with that curves selected, it's now brightening the dark parts of only what is white on this mask. So that has brightened up the family quite a bit. So now if I turn that off, you see the family goes back to being darker. If I turn the vibrance layer off, it's masking out the family. It's affecting only the vibrance of what's happening in the background. And of course, this layer underneath. So that takes us from a kind of a plain, bland sort of photo to something that's much more vibrant and has the family brought out in brightness just a little bit. So fairly simple, but a nice use of masks and inverting the masks, as well as curves and vibrance layers to bring the most out of a photo.